Obviously, we have opportunity to introduce a lot of our new assistant coaches, so we thought we'd take a little time this morning to do that. We're going to have Coach Beamer speak first. He'll have an opening statement, then we'll take questions for him, and then go to the assistant coaches. I have them scheduled about every 30 minutes, so we'll go up that time. If there's no more questions, then we'll let them go. With that, turn over to Coach Shane Beamer.
All right, also known as Olivia today on the screen. I see nothing screams SEC head football coach like using your daughter's iPad to do a Zoom call. So I apologize. Apologize about that. Thank God my kids are smarter technology-wise than me. But appreciate everybody being on. Happy holidays to all of you. Happy early New Year to all of you as well. And good to see Steve Fink back on here as well and doing well. Appreciate his toughness and hope our football team can continue to be tough like Steve is as well, coming off his surgery. But really excited about this group of coaches that we've been able to retain and hire. I'm certainly thankful to President Caslin, Ray Tanner, our board, and our entire administration for allowing us and giving us the resources to make this happen. It's a group of guys that want to be at South Carolina. They all had other opportunities in the SEC, but chose to stay here or to come here, which I'm really, really excited about and pleased about the group. Obviously, we're not done. We still have some work to do. I'm really excited. There's always going to be questions and people have thoughts about hires and all that. You expect that in the SEC. I've got it in my own household. My 7-year-old son is mad at me because we haven't hired Nick Saban and Dabo Sweeney as assistant coaches. And so he's on me every day, like, why don't you just call them and get them to come coach? And Coach Tanner and the administration have been very good. I'm not sure they're going to budget $8 million for assistant coaches right now as well. But excited about this group. Like I said, first of all, just the ones that are staying with us. Mike Bobo, very thankful that we were able to keep Mike. It's no secret that when he came to South Carolina, he had other options out there besides the University of South Carolina when he came last season. And this year is no different. Proven SEC coordinators that have a track record of success are hard to find. And when you've got a guy like Mike Bobo on your staff, you certainly want to keep him around. I've known Mike for a long time. As a matter of fact, when I was coaching at Virginia Tech with my dad, we actually tried to hire Mike as our offensive coordinator. This would have been probably 2013, I believe, to the point where we sent a plane to Athens, Georgia to pick him up that he never got on. He had a hard time leaving Athens, which I certainly understand. But he's a guy that I think a lot of as a person, as a recruiter, as a human being. I love his family. And so thankful that he's staying here with us. If Mike had not been on the staff at South Carolina when I got this head coaching job, he would have been my first call as offensive coordinator. I mean, I think that much of him. You look at what he did at the University of Georgia and his track record of success for a long, long time. It speaks for itself. What he did at Colorado State with their offense speaks for itself. And then the fact, I mean, not to make excuses for him, but he came into a tough situation in Columbia. New system, no spring practice, COVID, an unusual summer, an unusual season. And certainly I'm not going to hold that against him. And you look at what South Carolina did this season running the football, and we're excited about what we'll be able to do going forward, adding to that. You know, I hear people say, well, his offense is completely different than what you did at Oklahoma. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Anybody that says that probably hasn't watched Oklahoma play a lot of football this year. People hear air raid in Oklahoma and think that we throw it around 70 times a game and we're going up tempo and all that stuff. And that's not us at all. Oklahoma's offense has set records year in, year out. And we've done it actually running the ball more than we've thrown it the last 5 years. I don't know what the stats are this year. I haven't seen it, but I know going into the season, we had run it more than we had thrown it. People say Mike Bobo uses a fullback. Well, so does Oklahoma. We call it an H-back to make it sound fancier, but it's the same thing. And we do a lot with them. So offensively, it's very similar. There's certainly some aspects of Mike's offense that I want to keep. And Mike and I have talked about it, and he's excited about it, being able to implement a lot of the things that we did at Oklahoma in the running game and the passing game. I think some things that we were doing in both those run and pass are pretty on the cutting edge stuff offensively. And I'm really pumped about the opportunity to blend those two systems together and get the best offense for South Carolina going forward. Because at the end of the day, you've got to be tough. You got to be physical. You got to play with great discipline. You've got to have the ability to run and throw the football both. You've got to be a great situational football team, in my opinion, and we'll be all those things. And being able to add, like I said, combining the elements of it, I'm excited about. Really pumped about being able to keep Des Kitchings as the running backs coach. He's someone that I've thought a lot of for a long time. I've seen Des on the road recruiting. When I was at Georgia, I spent a couple of days in Raleigh, North Carolina, visiting with their staff about some things that Kirby Smart had sent me up there to visit with, and got to know Des a little bit better then. Fantastic recruiter, fantastic person, fantastic coach. Did a great job at the running backs at South Carolina this season, which I think is a testament to him, because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, he didn't get hired till the springtime, if I'm not mistaken. So he's another one that really hasn't been in Columbia for a long, long time. Knew and liked him as a coach and as a person long before I got the job, but just in my short time on the job, I've been just absolutely blown away by Des and what he's about. It still seems like every single person that we're recruiting, whether it be a running back, a offensive lineman, a linebacker, a defensive back, a defensive lineman, a potential transfer, a high school prospect, a JUCO prospect, Des knows them and has been involved in their recruitment. They know him. And I'm really fired up by that. He's a team guy that certainly has done a great job from a recruiting standpoint that I know Mike thinks a lot of as an offensive coach. The fact that he's been an offensive coordinator before, I think is very beneficial, brings a lot to the offensive staff room from an X's and O's standpoint. And he's got, let's face it, he's got great ties to the state of South Carolina and is well thought of by a lot of people, high school coaches, fellow college coaches, and high school prospects as well. Tracy and I spent 1 year together at the University of Georgia. My first year there with Kirby Smart, so I know what I'm getting with Tracy. Another one that's been here at Carolina for less than a year. Got hired in February, if I believe, or if I'm correct in saying that. So I know what kind of coach he is. He's loyal. He's demanding. He's what you want, what I want as a member of this staff. Great technician when it comes to coaching defensive line. Great recruiter and great person. Think the world of his family when we lived in Athens. As a matter of fact, he lived up the street from me, and before Mike Bobo lived around the corner from Tracy Rocker. So known Tracy a long time and know what he's about. He's coached at the highest level and he's played at the highest level, which I think speaks volumes. The success he had as a football player in college, and then what he did at the next level. And then the fact that he's has a track record of success at the college level as a defensive line coach, but has also coached at the pro level. I got a text last night from Sylvester Kroom, my head coach when I coached at Mississippi State. He and Tracy worked together in Nashville together with the Tennessee Titans, and he texted me to say you couldn't have hired a better coach and person than Tracy Rocker to coach your defensive line. And that means a lot to me coming from Coach Kroom because of the respect I have for him. And again, it's those guys have not been here long. They're excited about their future at Carolina. They didn't want to go anywhere. They could have gone other places, but I'm really pumped that they're going to stay here with us and get this thing moving forward. And then Mike Peterson. Mike is the one of those three that I did not have a pre-existing relationship with. Knew about him as a player at the college level, and then the success that he had in the NFL as a player. But I met with Mike just like I met with all these guys literally the first day in Columbia. I walked in the building, and the first thing I did was start meeting with assistant coaches, and told Mike that I'd heard a lot of great things about him, but was going to take my time and wanted to make sure it was a fit for both of us going forward, that I wanted to get a defensive coordinator hired first and things of that nature. And just the more and more I talked to potential defensive coordinators, the more and more I found out about Mike Peterson. It was obvious to me that he's a guy that we needed to keep in this program. His ability as a recruiter, the kind of person he is, the relationships that he has with the players on our team stood out to me. I've talked to pretty much every single player on our team. I've met with probably 35 of them in person, and I'll get the rest of them when they get back to school in January. And I wasn't going through and asking the players on the team, who do I need to keep and who do I need to let go? We weren't having those conversations. But in a lot of those conversations, those guys on their own brought up potential coaches and coach, just want you to please keep in mind. And it seemed like the more and more guys I met, the more and more those 4 names came up. And not just the players they coach. Defensive linemen and linebackers talking to me about Mike Bobo and the impact he's had on this team in the short time he's been here. Offensive linemen talking to me about Tracy Rocker. Defensive backs and wide receivers talking to me about Mike Peterson and how much impact he's had on those guys. The Des Kitchings and the linebackers. I could go on and on and on. So I thought that spoke volumes as well, and really pleased that we were able to keep these guys on board, like I said. And then Connor Shaw, the day that I walked in the building, when I met with Connor Shaw, he sat down in my office, and the first thing I said to him is, under no circumstances am I letting you walk out of this building and not be part of this program. He is everything that's right about South Carolina football. And I was not going to let him walk out that building and go anywhere else, even if that was off campus or on campus, across campus, to work in administration. I told him we had to make sure it was the right fit for both of us with his role going forward. And I believe it is. We've had some good conversations. He and I are still kind of working through the specifics of exactly what his role is going to be going forward. But I can tell you that he will have a more involvement on the football side of things. I mean, he wants to continue in the role that he's in a lot of ways, but he also wants to be more involved with things from a football side of football aspect of it, a recruiting aspect of it. And my last conversation with Connor was we would sit down again and hash out the specifics and craft the specifics of his role that's right for both of us. But he's excited about this position. We certainly talked about on-field positions. We talked about off-field positions, and I wanted to do what was right for Connor, and Connor wanted to do what was right for South Carolina. And I'm confident and very certain that we're both on the same page with that going forward, and really enthused about the impact that he's going to be able to make on this program going forward, for sure. And on down the road as well. And then the 3 new additions that we're here to talk about as well. First of all, Pete Limbo, our new associate head coach and special teams coordinator. When you talk about, if you asked any college coach in the country, who are the top special teams coaches in the entire world, there's no doubt that Pete Limbo's name would come up in the first 1 or 2, 3 guys that were mentioned by every college coach. He has that much respect from people across the country. We actually at Oklahoma, we had a special teams meeting earlier this season, and I've told Pete this story. It was early on. I think they played Arkansas State in their first game before the regular season really got going for everybody else. And we made a point, the coach for us at South Carolina or at Oklahoma that coached our kickoff team put a shot of Memphis's kickoff team covering a kick against Arkansas State, just to say in our first game this week, this is the emotion, this is the effort, this is the passion that we need to play with when we cover kicks, because it was amazing to watch. He's always this is not to knock anywhere that he's been, but a lot of places that he's been at places where maybe they don't have quite the talent of their opponents, the people in their conference, and he's produced top end special teams year in, year out on a consistent basis. I'm a special teams guy. I'm excited about that. I want to continue to be involved in special teams and not get away from that, just like I'll be involved with the offense and the defense. But a chance to get a guy like Pete Limbo in here, I wasn't going to hire just a special teams coordinator. If Pete Limbo had decided not to come, and he had other options, more than one out there as well, if Coach Limbo had decided not to come, I'm not even sure I would have hired a special teams coordinator. I had a bunch of them hitting me up, and it's certainly something that I would have considered. But if I couldn't get what I consider the very best in the country, I'm not sure I would have hired one. I would have probably used that position to go in a different direction and coached them myself amongst the staff. But an opportunity to get him, who is elite, in my opinion, was a no-brainer. I love the fact that he's been a head coach before, along with Mike Bobo. As a first-time head coach, I want to be able to rely on these guys and some of the things that they've been through, good and bad, that I can rely on as a resource. He's got great recruiting ties and personal ties in this part of the country, the state of North Carolina, and up and down the East Coast. So we'll bring a lot to the table, and certainly thankful that he and his family are headed to Columbia. Will Friend, our new offensive line coach, Will and I actually I mentioned it, he lived in the same house. So he lived in the house that I moved into when I took the job in Athens in 2016. Will had lived there before I did. Across the street was Jeremy Pruitt. So it's kind of a who's who of the SEC that's been in this little neighborhood. But first got to know Will living in his house when I first got there. But another guy that we tried to hire when we tried to hire Mike Bobo to come to Virginia Tech, Mike was going to bring Will Friend with him as his offensive line. And unfortunately for us at Virginia Tech at the time, they decided to stay at Georgia. But it's worked out, and things have certainly come full circle. He's got SEC experience at multiple schools. If you look at what Mike Bobo has accomplished as an offensive coordinator and for all of the great offenses that he had at Georgia, and you can go year in, year out, and that's a fact. His most successful time period as an offensive coordinator was when Will Friend was his offensive line coach. So this was obviously your offensive coordinator and your offensive line coach. Those two guys got to work well together. They've got to mesh together. And from day one, this was who Mike Bobo wanted to get in here as the offensive line coach. And I'm thankful that we were able to get it done. Obviously, it wasn't easy to get him to leave Tennessee. They certainly did not want him leaving Knoxville. But I'm excited about having him here. And I did my research on him. And it's not something as simple as Mike Bobo saying that he wants Will Friend as his offensive line coach. I got to make sure these guys fit and that they're the kind of guys and coaches that I want in this program. And I did a lot of research on my end on all these guys. And I talked to a lot of people about Will Friend, people at Tennessee that I trust, players at Georgia that were there with Mike Bobo and Will Friend that I reached out to just to get their thoughts on it. And they couldn't have been more positive about those two guys and then specifically Will, from talking to a lot of those players at Georgia, the type of impact he had on them, not just offensive linemen, but tight ends that I coached when I was at Georgia that were there with Will Friend as well. And that really solidified things in my mind. And then finally, our new tight ends coach, Eric Cambrie. I guess it's not really a welcome or a welcome back. It's welcome over. I guess he's just heading across town, but a guy that loves Carolina, and that's important to me. All 7 of these guys are guys that want to be at Carolina for the right reasons. It's well-versed and well-known how much Eric Cambrie, what South Carolina means to him and his family over multiple generations. He's a guy, if you look at high school coaches that have made the jump to college coaching, and this isn't a knock on any other coach in that role, but I would argue that he's more qualified than any high school coach that's ever made the jump to college football. He played college football. He coached college football with Coach Holtz. He's won 12 state championships, if I'm not mistaken. And he's done it at a high level over a long time consistently. He saw with Boogie Huntley and Jordan Birch and the countless number of other players that have come out of Hammond. He saw every college coach in practically the country roll through his high school, and he had a front row seat to college coach after college coach after college coach that he visited with, that he saw talk to his players, that he was able to observe and learn from some of the good things they did, some of the bad things that they did. So that's been a great, that'll be a great resource for us as well, and something that certainly helped him prepare him for this opportunity. And he's not just coming to Carolina because he's a third generation Gamecock and has won a bunch of championships. He's a heck of a football coach that has a great offensive mind. That when I was coaching with Coach Spurrier back in 2007, 8, 9, and 10, we used to talk about Eric Cambrie and how brilliant an offensive mind he had, the way that he thought as a head coach. And he's certainly a guy that loves Carolina, but will certainly help Carolina as well on and off the field. He's jumped into recruiting. I know he talked to some tight ends last night that were recruiting already, and they texted me as soon as they got off the phone with him how much they loved their visit with him and how they could tell the passion coming out of his voice. And I was excited about that. And he's a guy that in my trips to Hammond, and I've always gone through Hammond trying to recruit Jordan Birch and trying to recruit Boogie, whether I was at the University of Georgia or Lincoln Riley and I spent a day at Hammond back when I was coaching at Oklahoma, and we were trying to recruit those two guys. And he's someone that I always enjoyed visiting with and talking to in my trips there, and really thankful that I've been able to get him on this staff. We've got a few more hires out there, as you guys know, 3 more on the field hires, and then a strength coach, and then all the support staff around those guys as well. Pleased with the progress that we're making there. I've had some really productive conversations with a lot of different guys. Certainly have an idea of the direction those hires are going to go, one way or another, and pleased with where we are on all of them. Nothing's changed since the last time we talked, and there's still a huge amount of interest from people and coming to Carolina. We're making progress, and hopefully, I want to get that wrapped up sooner than later, but we still have a couple weeks until the players come back to Columbia, when we've got to have all that in place, and know that we will by then. So again, appreciate you guys being on this morning, and I'll be glad to answer any of your questions in the remaining time that we have.
We got about 10 minutes here, so we'll roll through these as quick as we can. Josh Kendall with the first one.
Morning, Shane.
Morning, Josh.
You mentioned when you talked about Pete having head coaches and Mike and even Eric at the high school level. What specifically can those guys do, and what types of things do you think you might bounce off of them in terms of just picking their brain on that side of things?
I think it's everything. I mean, many coaches have told me that until you sit in that chair, you don't really know. And there's so many things that come across my desk just in the last 3 weeks that I never had to deal with as an assistant coach, which I understand that. I saw my dad do it my entire life. So I get that. So I think it could be everything, weight room, discipline, practice schedules, motivation, travel. I mean, there's so many things that certainly I'll be picking their brains on, and along with the other coaches as well. I mean, I have an idea of how I want things to work. Ultimately, I'm the head coach. I got to make final decisions, but I certainly think that when you have guys like that have sat in that chair and then understand the issues that you have to deal with, it certainly will help me and make my job easier in some ways, having those guys around.
Is there anything in the first 3 weeks or so, ballpark, that has been a surprise yet? I mean, you've been prepared, you've seen your dad do it forever, but is there just a moment in 3 weeks that you thought, well, I hadn't got that penciled in?
Not necessarily. I mean, I've had a pretty good idea. Probably when, they came in there and they wanted to talk to me about how I wanted to decorate the office and what kind of chairs I wanted and carpet and pictures and things like that. I'm just trying to figure out how to turn on the computer in my office right now, much less, the decoration. So that's one thing. And I just said, you know what, my wife can handle that, and I'll work on that. But it's a lot of stuff. Nothing that's really been a surprise yet. It's been, I've only been in Columbia, 6 total days since I got the job. And most of that has been meeting with the current players on the team, which I've really enjoyed those meetings. But I wouldn't say any kind of big surprise, but I know it's a lot that'll still be coming for sure.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Rick Henry.
Hey, Shane, happy holidays to you and your family. You touched on this a little bit with Eric, but how valuable is it to have a guy like Eric who has the passion for Carolina? He really wants to be here. He's been a student athlete for the Gamecocks, especially when it comes to recruiting, when he can talk to a high school kid and give them all the ins and outs about being a football player for South Carolina.
I think it's huge. I mean, it reminds me a lot when I went back to Virginia Tech to coach. It was where I grew up. It was where the school I loved. It was where I played. And putting that VT on my logo was a little bit different than when I was at Mississippi State, and because it's where you went to school, and you certainly more about it. I mean, I love Carolina. I've made no bones about that, and it's special wearing that Block C on my chest. But when it's a place that you've actually grown up, you've been a fan since the day you were born, you went to school here, you played here, it certainly makes a difference. And I'm excited about that. And the response that I've gotten from high school coaches across the state that have texted me and called me as well to say what a great hire that was, that what a great coach Eric Cambrie is, but what a fantastic person he is, and how excited they are to work with him. I think there's so many positives, and he's someone that, when I interviewed for this job, I talked to Ray Tanner and Chance Miller about Eric Cambrie potentially being on this staff, and certainly thankful that it worked out the way it did.
David Cloninger.
Hey, Shane, with Bobby Bentley, Joe Cox, and Paul Jackson, were those guys retained, or are conversations still going?
We've had conversations with all those guys. I want to talk today about the guys that are coming and are staying, and let those guys address it. I've met with all of them, and they know their status. Each situation's a little bit different with all those guys. Think a lot of all of them, and I told all of them it's been a tough year. Particularly with Paul coming in as a strength coach and not even having an off-season program. It's certainly been tough and whatnot. So I've had conversations with Paul, his assistants, and I've had a couple of multiple conversations with Joe and Bobby both. And we'll see how that transpires going down the road. But feel good about where we are with both those guys as well. They're great coaches, they're great people, and I've been impressed with all of those guys in my short time at Carolina.
Ben Briner.
Hey Shane, how much of the back end recruiting staff are you planning to kind of hold on to, and how important is it to have those folks potentially back, and then the amount of continuity with the 4 assistants, considering the opening of the transfer process this season and the potential for more attrition?
Is that that's a new 2021 haircut, huh, Ben?
It was way overdue.
I like it. All right. Forgive me again. I was trying to make sure that I had it. Run that by me again. The support staff you said in the transfer. Sorry about that. The haircut threw me off.
The support staff and the value in having that continuity with the potential attrition and movement in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. In regards to the support staff, we're working through all that. A lot of those guys are still going to be in the building, and there's some other ones that we're still talking to about joining as well. Coach Tanner and the administration have been great from a resource standpoint in regards to the support staff. If we needed to potentially add some roles, giving me the flexibility to do that. And it's huge. I mean, the more people you have touching your players inside the building and being involved with them, and then outside the building as well, the ones that you're recruiting is a huge aspect of it. And all these guys in our building have relationships with the current players and then the players outside the building as well, better than I do right now. And I'm trying to do the best job I can of connecting with all of our current players and meeting with them and listening to them and getting to know them. And that will continue as well as the players outside the building that we're trying to add to our program as well.
Eric Boynton.
Yeah, Happy New Year, Shane. Could you kind of give us a little insight as to specifically almost Mike Bobo, because he's the most high-profile holdover. I know you've got 4 of them, but give us some insight into how much, your decision went into Mike Bobo's skills and what you thought about him, as opposed to really maybe needing to clean house after a mediocre year and getting a fresh start throughout your staff, especially at one of your highest, assistant positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a thought, and I had coaches tell me that I talked to a new head coach in college football yesterday that told me, he's like, I'm going in as the new head coach and I'm not keeping anyone. And I think every situation's different. There's certainly the merit where you got to come in and clean house and fresh start and all that, but I also think you look at it from, I've got a heck of an offensive coordinator in the building already that has been here for less than a year, that has proven that he can coordinate successful offenses in the SEC, that can recruit at a high level and is loyal as all get out and is a great person. And I'm sitting there, if you're talking about coordinators, there's not many proven coordinators across the country, particularly ones with SEC experience. And there's different guys out there. There's flashy names and all that stuff. I get it. But a guy that believes in what I believe in, that wants to be at Carolina, that's done it for a long time. Like I said, I mean, if he hadn't been on the Carolina staff, I would have tried to have hired him. And I had an SEC head football coach, 2 of them actually, call me when it was announced that Mike was staying, and said that's a big time hire. And it's not a guy that's telling me what I want to hear. They're 2 guys that know football, and they said Mike Bobo's as good as they come. I had Bud Foster is a close friend of mine, the old defense coordinator at Virginia Tech, and Bud and I were talking, and we talked about Mike, because Virginia Tech played Georgia in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl I think 10 years ago, or 2000. I was at Mississippi State, so a while ago, and Bud still talked about what a great job he thought Mike Bobo did and how challenging that preparation was for him and all that. So Mike Bobo has the respect of coaches across the country. That's why he had other opportunities when he came to South Carolina. That's why he had other opportunities this year if he chose not to go or not to stay at South Carolina. So he'll have a huge impact on us. And then, like I said, I mean, I'd be crazy not to implement a lot of the aspects of what we did off Oklahoma offensively. I went to Oklahoma and left Georgia for the sole reason of getting connected with Lincoln Riley and his offense. So I'd be crazy to not implement aspects of what we did on offense at Oklahoma here at South Carolina. And Mike knows that. I'm going to be involved with the offense and want to be involved with the offense, and certainly we believe in a lot of the same things. And at the end of the day, you got to get the ball to your playmakers. And we've got to get more and more playmakers developed in this program. And we've got to recruit more and more playmakers in this program. Because I don't care if you are Sean Payton or whoever, Sean McVay, the greatest, Lincoln Riley, you got to have great players. And we've got a really good group of guys in our program already that we can build around. And then we've got the opportunity between now and the start of the season to add to those guys as well and increase the playmaking ability in this offense.
Mike Kuba?
Good morning, Shane. Obviously, as a head coach and just as a coach in general and a football player, sudden change happens all the time on the field. And much like being a coach off the field, how does the process of hiring some of these guys in terms of whether it's the receiver position, whether it's a defensive coordinator, how can that kind of change in terms of some of these openings? Or I should say, coaching changes for you, whether, guys are getting fired or leaving different programs. How has that kind of evolved for you over the last couple of weeks?
Great question. I mean, I think it's certainly evolved and changes each day. When I got hired at South Carolina, I didn't anticipate Auburn necessarily making a change. And that certainly changes things across the dynamic of college football. I think you'll see a lot of stuff happen after some of these bowl games coming up, whether it be coaches getting let go, coaches changing jobs. The NFL season is going to end here in about a week. That's going to impact stuff with some of these NFL coaches and changes that happen. So certainly things change each and every day that you don't anticipate. That's for sure. But I've got the guys in my mind that I want to talk to and have been talking to and will continue to talk to, understanding that their situations could change as well as other opportunities may potentially come along. And then also understanding that the situation here at Carolina could potentially change in our minds as different opportunities, as different jobs come open, I should say. So it changes each and every day, but the core guys that I've been interested in talking to really haven't changed a lot from day one. And you take the different changes, sudden change, as you say, as they come.
And has it been challenging at all in terms of just the time frame? Because obviously this year is much different with, when you were hired, a lot of bowl games necessarily wouldn't be going on or seasons wouldn't be going on. How has that kind of impacted? Obviously this is your first head coaching job, but how has that kind of created some challenges?
No, it's been very challenging. I won't lie. You nailed it. Normally when a head coach gets hired, the season's over except for the bowl games. And I got hired and some college teams had 3 games left before the bowl game, 2 regular season games and a championship game. And so it's certainly been challenging from that standpoint, just the time frame of it. We've navigated it. We've got 7 guys hired today, which I'm extremely pleased about. There's 7 guys that and I've said this on some interviews in the past, when I met with Coach Tanner and Chance Miller, I presented to him a potential, staff, and it was really an A, B, C at each position. And these guys were right at the top of that list. When I met with those guys in the interview, all these guys were discussed. And I'm excited that they're with us now. And then the other 3 hires that we can potentially have a chance, or the other 3 hires that are going to happen here shortly as well, are all guys that we discussed that day as well. So pleased with where we are. It has been a little bit more challenging this year, but in a lot of ways, it's, I was going to take my time, but it's forced me to be even a little bit more thorough in some ways. And we'll see how this thing shakes out going down the stretch.
We got time for 2 more, Hale, and then Scotty Eisberg. Hale.
Thanks, Steve. Coach, what are some of the characteristics you're looking for your defensive coordinators, and more about scheme, philosophy, things like that, or obviously fit within your staff and program? How will you kind of balance all those things as you're looking to fill that spot?
Yeah, great question. We got to believe in a lot of the same things. And first of all, he's got to be a great person, first and foremost. I want great people in this program, great men, great teachers, guys that are loyal, hardworking, all that stuff. So we've got to be a fit from a personality standpoint and make sure that we believe in the same things off the field as far as how we live our lives. I mean, that's first and foremost. And then beyond that, you've got to be multiple. And any coordinator that I'm talking to or I've had conversations with, they believe that. I mean, offenses are too good now in college football that if you just line up in the same thing every single down and play the same coverage every single down, it's going to be tough to stop people. You've got to be multiple in your scheme and play to your personnel. I mean, some years your personnel may be a little bit different by what you have at linebacker, defensive line, secondary, and that affects the scheme that you play with. So multiple in scheme. And then at the end of the day, I just believe you've got to be you got to be great at fundamentals. Football nowadays is a game of playing in space. So you've got to be great tacklers and limit big plays. You've got to be situationally aware, and then, you've got to play with relentless, unbelievable effort. And, I believe if you do those things, you have a chance to be a successful defense. And those are the main things I'm looking for, and continuing to talk to coordinators to make sure that we mesh from a philosophy standpoint and everything. It's the scheme on the field on Saturdays. It's the way they want to practice during the week against the offense, and what your offense is doing, and making sure that the defense complements that, and that we're allowing both sides of the ball to be prepared for Saturdays and things of that nature as well. And like the track that we're on, and excited about the direction that we're going right now.
Last question for Shane goes to Scotty Eisberg.
Hey, Shane, just wondering if it came up during the negotiations at all with Eric Cambrie, if he gets to call a fade pass on 4th down or anything like that from a backup quarterback.
I was waiting on that one. No, I've heard from many people that have mentioned that, either the podcast or the touchdown and all that. But certainly, if we have the quarterbacks and receivers out there to execute the fade, we will be calling many of them, and we'll certainly let Eric have a huge hand in that as well. He made a lot of plays, and he made that great play at Carolina, and had a great experience as a player, and hoping that he'll have many more big plays attached to him and his group as a coach here at Carolina as well.